we'll discuss about types of constructors. So what is constructor and types of constructors? Okay. So what is constructor? For example, I have a class, public class program. Public int id equals to 1001. Now, if I take a class file, here I have a class. Okay. So, and when you want to create some property inside your class, okay, for example, again, addition. My class name is addition. Inside that, I have two variables, int a equals to 10, int b equals to 20, public void add. Console.writeLine a plus b. So now this is, we'll call it as a class members. This will call it as a class members. Now to initialize these class members, okay, so apart from console application, it does not allow you to initialize inside the class. Okay, so only in console application we can do like this. Okay, so we cannot directly initialize these class variables inside your class, usually outside of the console application. Only console application we can able to do this like this. Okay, otherwise it won't allow like this. Okay, so what you have to do, create like a property here and you will initialize within your constructor. So what is constructor? Okay, so how we will do in real time, it will take, we'll declare two variables here, int a and b. Okay, so when you declare two variables, okay, so we need to initialize those variables. Okay, we need constructor. So what is constructor here? Constructor is a special member of class. Why I am calling it as a special member of class? Constructor name will be same as class name. Okay, public addition. Okay, constructor is a, this is, we'll call it as a constructor. Constructor is a special member of the class. So all will call it as member, but constructor I am calling it as a special member of function, as a special member of class, because constructor name is similarly must be same like class name. Then only we'll call it as a constructor. Constructor name must be same as class name. Okay, so what is constructor here? Special type of method in a class, and constructor name must be same as class name, and when you create object for the class, constructor will get invoked automatically. Okay. Next, when you don't have, so we'll see this practically. Okay. So this we have seen special. Constructor is a special method in a class, and constructor name must be same as class name, right? Now, when you create object for the class, constructor will get invoked automatically. We'll see this practically later. And by default, compiler creates default constructor and it initialize with default values. So these 2 points we'll see practically now. For example, I have a string ram or name. Next, bool gender. Next, daytime, DOB, date of birth. So let's assume these are all the values we have. And when you create an object for the class, constructor will get invoked automatically. Let me put the debugger here. Okay, so this is constructor, and when I try to create the object, okay, so I'll take one more class here. So here I give like a class library. Let us move this to console app only. Okay, so in main class, I'll try to create an object for this constructor class. Sorry, addition class. How to create object? Okay, addition, add equals new addition, add dot add. I'm just going to call this class. Okay guys, now let's see what will happen. So this is how we created the object. See guys, carefully. Okay, so this is also important interview question. So when constructor will get called, that is one question. Okay, and when you create the when compiler create the default constructor, what is the default values it will assign? Okay, so when constructor will get invoked and what are the default values it will assign to constructor? These two are the interview questions we will face. Okay, so now let's start. Addition equals new addition. Next, see guys, when I am doing this instantiation, so that particular it get we are not calling anything here. Addition, are we calling? No. By default, compiler will get invoke this constructor during your object creation. Okay, so now this constructor will get invoked, right? So or if you want to print something, console dot write line constructor invoked. F11, F10. So that time, so when you create the object, by default, automatically this is going to invoke your constructor invoked. Then it will go and call this method add. So now what is the default values? We didn't initialize date. Okay, so what are the default values? Okay, so see here, A is 0, B is 0. Because by default, integer value will be 0. So at 0 plus 0, it will print 0. And what about other values? We have other values as well. Okay. By default, string will give the null. Okay. Means default value is the string is null. And A and B are the integers. By default, integer or decimal or float values will be 0. And what is the Boolean value? Default value will be false. And date of birth 0101 0001. Understood, guys? When you create a default constructor, okay, by default compiler is going to invoke the values with default values. Okay, so date of birth default value, Boolean default value will be false, integer default value will be 0, and string default value will be null. This is how the compiler will create the default values while creating the constructor. Okay, when you don't have a constructor, for example, here you have constructor now. Okay, so what is the output we'll get? Constructor invoked, and 0 plus 0, it will print the 0. When you don't have constructor, that time what will happen? Let's see now. I told we'll be having a default constructor. Okay, so how this will work? So compiler only invoke that default constructor. Addition equals to new addition. So now, when you don't have a constructor also, by default, compiler will create a default constructor, and that is going to initialize the default values like this. Understood?